We know even in science, nothing is static, nothing is fixed. Everything is in flux, everything is moving, everything is coming and going. So even the laws of nature that seem to be unchanging are constant miracles. It's a very heavy time of the year. The beginning of the month of Nissan, pesach, all the miracles, all the mitzvahs, customs, traditions. It's a rich, rich month. And we're coming from Purim. One redemption followed by another. But let's just quickly talk about the months. We are told that this month, the month of Nissan, is the first month of the year, even though it is not the beginning of the year. Our year begins in Tishrei, when the world was created, which makes sense. The year begins when time began. And yet, for the Jewish people, the first month of the year is the month of Nissan. Now, one of the differences between the 2 months is that Tishrei represents the reality of nature. It's a complicated concept, but the fact that God is eternal and unchanging is where nature, whatever that is, gets its stability. Why are there predictable laws of nature that are constant and unchanging? Because there's that part of God that is constant and unchanging. He is eternal and cannot change. In other words, he can't exist more, he can't exist less. The month of Nissan, on the other hand, represents miraculous intervention, miraculous behavior on God's part. And that is a reflection of the part of God that seemingly does change. So the distinction, the difference between the 2 months is that one is speaking about God's unchanging existence, which is perfect, cannot be improved upon, also cannot be weakened or shortened or decreased. And then there is the part of God that has a purpose, a plan, a kavanah, an intention. And that's constantly changing because we're moving closer every day to the fulfillment of that purpose to achieve that goal. And that introduces miraculous behavior, supernatural behavior into the world. So when God decided to start the process of elevating the world and completing its purpose by choosing the Jewish people to take that responsibility and make those changes, that's when the month of Nissan became the first of months, the Rosh Hashanah of miracles, the Rosh Hashanah of the purpose of creation. Now, obviously, in the month of Tishrei, when God first created the world, the purpose was very much real and very much a part of creation itself. But it wasn't revealed. Now, after God gives us the Torah, and after we know what the purpose is, now when we look back at creation, we can see that it was there all along. But it was not obvious at first. And that's because the Torah wasn't given yet, the mitzvahs weren't in force yet, and the Jews were not empowered to bring about that change. So, summing up, the month of Tishrei represents nature, the unchanging laws, so to speak, of nature, and that is a reflection of God's unchanging nature. And then there is the month of Nissan, which is more personal. And in the personal development of the purpose and relationship that God has with his world, in this, there is supernatural behavior. Constant growth, constant change. Of course, constant and change are a little contradictory and opposites. But this duality, that there is the laws of nature and then there is supernatural behavior, this is an idea that Hasidus very thoroughly explains away and says there's only one creation, there's only one God, there's only one purpose, there's only one Torah. You can't have that duality be absolute. Two separate, distinct functions, that's not possible. This is a universe. So Hasidus explains that if we look past the surface, nature itself is miraculous, that nature itself is a constantly changing reality because God is recreating the laws of nature every moment. Because if he didn't, the world would stop existing. In other words, nature would not be nature if it wasn't happening. So it only appears as if God created the world 5,779 years ago, and it's been going ever since in a constant, static condition. But it's not like that at all. We know even in science, nothing is static, nothing is fixed. Everything is in flux, everything is moving, everything is coming and going. So even the laws of nature that seem to be unchanging are constant miracles. Everything is a miracle. Like that medrash that we speak about often, where Moshe says to God, why are you angry at the people for bowing to a cow? They're just expressing their gratitude for the milk. The cow produces milk, provides milk, people enjoy the milk, and this is before lactose intolerance, and they're just showing their gratitude. And God says, you too, Moshe, you're making the same mistake. A cow does not make milk. I have to make the cow, I have to make the milk, I have to make the cow give the milk. It's all miraculous. So we may have the impression, God said, let there be cows, so the cows give milk, because that's what a cow does. If God says, let there be bees, well, then they're going to produce honey. That's what bees do. But how is it that that's what bees do, or that's what cows do? That itself, that a bee produces honey and a cow makes milk, that is something God had to create. And if he had to create it, then he has to recreate it every moment or it would stop happening. So there is no, how do we put this? There's no natural cause that links cows with milk. There's no natural cause that says bees have to produce honey. There's no natural cause that says that a heavy object has to fall down, whatever heavy means. But the point is, there is nothing in the object that automatically produces its qualities or its properties. Every property, every characteristic, every trait has to be produced from nothing. So when God said, let there be a cow, nobody knew what a cow was supposed to do. So it didn't automatically produce an animal that gives milk. As we see in the description of creation, where God says, let the earth give forth vegetation, trees, right? Wouldn't that have been enough? But God goes on to say, the earth should give out trees that contain the seeds that will produce the fruit and other trees. So why does it have to be said? Just say, let there be trees. Now, naturally, trees have their seeds. And as the seeds fall down to the earth, a new tree takes root and it grows. Or the fruits develop because it's an apple tree, because it's an orange tree. Now, by saying tree, you're not producing or creating the characteristics and the properties of trees. So God has to say, let there be a tree, and a tree has to have seeds, and a tree should have the ability to reproduce itself, to carry its own seed, and so on. And the same thing when God says, let there be animals. He has to say animals that slither, and animals that fly, and animals that are alive, and that, because just saying animal doesn't mean anything. So, the miraculous nature of the month of Nissan is actually true throughout nature. That nature itself is a miracle. We spoke about this last week, that the universe is actually a religiously devoted response to God's instruction, to God's will. Everything in the universe is busy doing what God wants it to do. And that's the only reason that it does. So there are no really laws of nature. Nature doesn't dictate anything. The law of gravity is simply God's law. There is no law in nature. And that's why we're having a hard time figuring out what exactly gravity is. I guess the only real explanation is that it's the behavior that God wants bodies, masses, objects to follow. It's God's will. Nature doesn't dictate anything. In fact, the word nature, when we say the word, what do we mean? That when we say something is natural, what does that mean? If you were to ask a high school kid, why does water run downhill? Well, it's the nature of water. What does that word mean? Nothing causes the water to run downhill. It's nature. When we say nature, we're saying We know that it is that way, and we don't know why. That's the word nature. And that's because nature doesn't have a because. Water runs downhill because water runs downhill. There's nothing that makes it do that. Science can explain how it does it. Given liquid molecules, it flows better than objects that have different molecules. But that itself is just the how, it's not the why. Why does this have those kinds of molecules, and why do those molecules behave this way? So we're not really answering the why. We can never answer a why, because there is no why. The laws of nature are irrational. We assume them, we identify them, we cannot explain why they are what they are. So what are they? Simply God's will. You cannot dig deeper into nature and find out why it is what it is. To know why it is what it is, you have to ask the Creator. You can't ask the creation. Makes a little sense. So the month of Nissan is the month in which God's relationship with the world became personal. His kavanah, his intention, his plan, his desire for what the world should be and what the world does for him was revealed in this month. Not completely, because the Torah wasn't given until 50 days later, after we came out of Egypt. So it's in the month of Sivan. But the birth of the Jewish people, whose responsibility it is to fulfill that divine plan, this happened in the month of Nissan on the holiday of Pesach.
If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it.
I want to invite you to join us as VIPs, partners in our work, and join us also for a personal chat with other members of the VIP club. We talk about many things. There's an opportunity to ask, to respond, to make a comment, to meet the other supporters. And together we can really make a difference in Jewish life and in life in general. So join us. It's goodtoknow.org. Log in, call, make contact, and join us with the VIPs.